state forest, and other things along
Right.
you know, the trails group or anything else.
I think we're ready when you are doing, but looking at our cameraman over there.
You don't have all these distant trees.
No problem.
Okay, we can go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:01. And I'll start with roll call. Jordan Tate.
Brianna Rose.
Shelley Norton.
Marcia.
Ben Lowe.
John Clark.
Dave Griswold. Toby Bollier.
Tiz Crowley.
Perfect. So we can go through the June minutes.
Move we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
So, all in favor? No. All right, so starting with the subcommittee updates, I think I'm gonna go a little bit out of order, just kind of, since we have a guest, let Dave Griswold talk about the street tree inventory and also give us some updates on some of the things that the Community Forest Board is working on. So you have.
Okay, we've not met since May. We had a very active Arbor Week, and it's in the minutes that went around, talking about all of that. And my main purpose tonight was to give you an update on where the street tree inventory is. As you know, we got a second grant for 2017-18 to finish what wasn't done with the first grant, which is mostly in-town stuff. So I donated my time to leverage money for trees that Tony's going to talk about later, I guess. I started in September last year. I did around 600 and 700 trees last year. And I've done, I'll pass this around. This is the tablet that I'm using to collect the information. The blue dots, that's the area that I've done so far this summer. So I'm up to 1,311 trees that I've collected data on. I've been focusing south of the Little Androscoggin this year, and I've got it almost done. So what's left will be North Auburn, West Auburn, and I've also got a map. I got a map from Rosemary to keep track of the streets I've been on. So if anybody wants to come around, here are the ones that are in yellow. Are the streets that I've done. So the dots on the map are the ones that were done through the previous grant. And the yellow marked streets are the ones that I've taken care of.
So you did all that yellow already since our May?
No, most of the stuff up here I did last fall.
Oh, yeah.
But all of this, everything that's on the tablet is stuff that I've done this summer.
Yeah, I know. I had to see that, but I didn't see the yellow either.
And there's more to town than this. I mean, there's a bunch of streets down here. I've got to get up to, East Auburn is pretty well done, but I've got to get out to West Auburn, North Auburn, and some of the backside. I'm trying to cover everything.
First of all, thank you.
Oh, yeah,
That's
it is.
very
Yeah.
impressive. Thank you for donating your time to complete the inventory. Yes.
Yeah, those dots are ones that were there from the previous, we hired a consultant to do that in 2016.
Wow.
So the red squares are stumps. I'm not sure what the color code is here. Probably dark green is good trees and light green is fair trees. On this one, the blue trees are the good ones, and then it goes to fair and poor. There aren't very many poor ones. What I am finding is interesting. There's a lot of trees out there that are 35 to 45 inches in diameter. You go to the airport and it's discouraging that virtually everything is Norway maple.
That makes sense.
lot of big ash trees in South Auburn along the road, 35, 40-inch ash trees. So, they'd be at risk. And I'm doing stuff in the right of way as best as I can to find that from the database. That goes right into the database. I could go out in a day and do 40, 50 trees and come back and then download it, and it's on Rosemary's database right then. So
But nothing we can do about the actions at Gray Hut.
pretty much.
Cut them down.
Sorry?
Yeah, that or cut them down.
Wait for them to.
So that, yeah.
The ones that are out by themselves, maybe they'll get, some of them will get by. And there is some stuff in the literature that some of them can be treated chemically, but I wouldn't put much stock in that. We've got a few years because they discovered emerald ash borer in Maine, but it's up in Worcester County, so the closest we've got is down in New Hampshire. But they're coming. You can slow them down, but you can't prevent them.
So this question I have for you kind of leads away from this and ties into the next thing you wanted to talk about, the woodlot management, right? And perhaps, is there a way that we can include some kind of pest management within that woodlot management ordinance over time? Like here's the board working on. Would it be worth considering, I guess, or should we just defer to what the state?
The way to handle ash trees and, if you're going to do a harvest, is plan it at the time, look and see what's there. The information we have isn't species specific. We had a cruise done in 2008, so we have a general idea of what the inventory is on each of the woodlots. But I didn't see any point in redoing that at this point. We know it was cut at East Auburn in EL in 2013. So my focus primarily has been to, so far, is do interviews and find out what the measured objectives are in my particular lots. That was a piece that was kind of neglected before. And I've kind of put that, I've talked to the school department, I've talked to the parks department. We're going to focus on Pettingill and Sherwood Heights with the workshop that we've got planned for October. So have some discussion with, we're trying to get some of the stakeholders and hopefully some of you folks to come to that and have some dialogue. The most interesting bit of information that I picked up in the course of my research and interviews is that, well, a couple things. The Pettingill lot is pretty rugged in the streams. There are several streams on that go down into that fish pond in Pettingill Park. So if a harvest is done there, we're going to be especially careful of water quality best management practices. And that's something I'll capture in the plan, for instance. The other thing that surprised me, I talked to Sabrina Best at Parks and Rec about Mount Appetite, and I asked her for I guess there was a study done in 2014 around potential swaps with the Defense Department, which has been hanging on for forever and ever. But as I dug into that, I discovered that there's 79 acres out of that 285 odd acres that's in the current management plan that's got a recreation-only easement on it. So when we update the maps, and my thought is to get the data onto the database, where the lots are and the timber types is a layer, so it's not just sticking in a document somewhere.
So-
And have it more accessible for the city.
Yeah, so. let's
So
say-
that'll be identified that.
But does that mean that we can't harvest the trees just because it's 75 acres or?
Yeah,
Can't harvest
when it was purchased by the city,
Ton of trees in my backyard.
that's, I guess the 79 acres was purchased with a recreation-only easement on it. So timber management, the way I read it, is out the window on that piece. And I've got a map of it, I didn't bring it tonight, but we'll make sure when we update the plan that that's identified on the database. So anybody that goes in there later on knows what's going on.
So does that mean that the timber rights are still with the seller that sold it?
No, it just, the way an easement works is you give up certain rights to the property.
So
Conservation
are
easement,
no-
you can't build houses or whatever. And in this particular case, when it was sold as recreation only, is the only thing that's one of the, I guess that's in the covenant
So
when the
it's
deed passed.
a deed restriction.
Right. And I haven't taken the time to look and see how that would affect things on the ground. I think it's more towards the ball fields, so the area up on the north end is probably unhindered. You would have to I'll get into more detail before I bring it back, but that was kind of a surprise to me. So my plan is to focus on finishing the street tree inventory while the weather's good, and then finish up the management plan. I've started doing some of the revisions of the language. Probably do that later in the fall. But certainly by year end, I'll have that wrapped up.
Okay.
Brianna, she looked at her neighborhood, so I looked at mine. There are no spots. Is that because we don't have any public trees, or you just haven't gotten there yet? I live on University, so.
Yeah, that's all done, except it's not on the,
Tablet.
there's a blue area that's active here, so so everything, you can look on those
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
maps, and see, that's all been.
If you
that's all
told me,
been-
I believe you. I wanted to see that you
that's all done up in East Auburn.
Okay. Well, that's what I thought, but sometimes people don't know where to define our neighborhood. Are we in town, East Auburn, Park Avenue?
Yeah, I'm trying to do everything, so I don't believe that was done by the original consultant, but I picked that up. I'm gonna try to hit every mile, which is interesting, because having lived in Auburn for 30 years, a lot of places I've never seen.
And Tony, can you talk a little bit about the street tree inventory grant portion that's dedicated to the planting and where that is?
So Rick Hersom, City Arborist, has put together a map, which I have, if you're welcome to look at. He's identified 37 locations for replacement trees. And on these maps, it's color coded as far as what kind of trees we're proposing. We have, I think it's $8,000 to spend on trees. So this represents more than what that 8,000 would buy.
Okay.
So I guess we're looking for some direction as far as which locations, whoever is deciding on this, which locations they want to plant. I think he's going to pay for like 25 of those.
What were the criteria that Rick used to identify that ones?
I'm not sure.
Does that include any
Well,
of
as
the?
far as the species or the locations?
The locations.
In the grant application, we were looking to replace stump locations. So he mentioned he cut a bunch of trees down on Cambridge. It might not be the exact same
You took a
spot.
couple that are covered by that. There's a lot of places along there that haven't had trees recently. Maybe it's not a good place to go.
What about the baby trees we have growing in the tree farm?
Those are a few years away. I haven't been out.
So we can't use those.
Well, and that we have to
Right.
spend the money that we
Right.
were awarded on the trees. So, those tree nursery trees are a great resource, but we want to try and get rid of this $8,000 in terms of, is that just for purchasing the trees, or does that include labor to plant them as well?
It'd be for materials and the trees themselves. Labor would be through public works, which would be in-kind services, but I think we already have that covered.
Yeah, I'm the match.
Right?
Gotcha.
What's a mug handle?
That's
that a
our
neighborhood?
turnaround.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, if you're looking for some advice, I'd put them where they're most visible, and so it looks like Gamage Avenue, but very honestly, that's your area of expertise, so spend what you think where you need to, but the more visible, the better is my 2 cents.
I would say where the habitat is best, I guess, but that would probably be best determined by the arborist.
And
I don't want to shove responsibility and be like, oh, no, you pick, but I mean, I guess that would be, my opinion is where there's best space to plant them. Like you had mentioned, that there was a stump abutting a, retaining wall, and that might not be the best spot.
No,
So
I'm sure that was planted long ago. I'm sure when they put these in,
Right.
there's a grass strip that runs
Yeah.
one
so-
gamut with no power lines over it that's makes it a good place, and they've done a lot of work on the street over the
Oh,
last few years, so.
Yeah.
And it's probably
This
cheaper to
is-
do them all in the same area rather than
Yeah.
jump around to
Yeah.
spot to spot.
I guess I don't really know preference on which ones, so I guess whatever public works and ours think is the best option.
Maybe you should speak up because your recorder's
Right.
probably over there. You need a soft voice.
It's funny, I was thinking about that when we were all going through a roll call, and then like when the gears are turning as I'm talking, I get quiet. But yeah, so defer to whatever public works and the city arborist thinks is the best locations.
Is this going to be taken to the forest board
I
for
think
discussion?
It should be.
Yeah.
That's what the forest board is for.
Right.
Okay, so that
That's
would-
what I guess I was looking for.
Well, yeah, and mine is, I thought the forest board had already come and not moved forward. So, yeah, forest board gets first option. If they decline, we'll stick
Yeah.
it with staff.
Well, I know we had talked about it, kind of leading up in like April and May, and they deferred to what Public Works and the City of Auburn thought for locations. But
Right.
with this narrowed selection, do you want to bring it back to the forest board?
I
for
think we need
review?
to, what happened was I went to Tony in the spring and said, you know, we ought to try to plant some trees around Arbor Week, and they hadn't identified, they didn't have their detail together. So now they have some detail and we have something to talk about.
Okay, so we'll bring this back to forest board in
Right.
August would be the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll talk with Rick Shea and see if we want to have a special meeting.
Yeah, 'cause these need to get planted
Right.
in August.
They need to be
September,
purchased and
right?
ordered.
Yeah.
Like,
So-
Yeah,
as soon as
so we have
possible.
to-
So,
Yeah, you don't want to plant until September, October. It's
Could
too
we,
hot.
could we purchase them, because we'll know how many and roughly what kind, and then let
Yeah,
the forest
okay.
board
I'm
to
hoping to
just,
be able to do in August, or
Yeah.
like, well, as soon as possible.
and let them.
But you
determine.
don't
Well,
want
it depends on the
You want to get them
location.
in
I know.
the
If they have it by
Right, right, right.
species, based on location, so I think
Well,
we
I
have
mean,
to.
And then we have a couple
Have them, like,
random,
you know, held.
we have some.
Right.
Know how much we're spending, and then, yes, plan it in, you know.
so to
So
be
these are
clear,
proposed trees, right?
Mhm.
The squares.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of existing trees that aren't showing up on that map.
so just so we're clear and they don't get held up for us, our plan after everybody's seen that is the recommendation will come from the forest board, but it does not need to come back to us for action. So
No.
the forest board will take the action, will buy the product as soon as they take action. If they don't, we have a August 30th deadline to buy, or do they have? Because what time, you don't meet till the third Thursday of August.
Yeah, I'll talk to Rick, maybe we
Do a
haven't
special
met in
meeting
July,
earlier.
so we
Yeah.
can maybe.
Yeah, if you could meet earlier, so that they can have them, because it sounds to me like you'd like to have them available as of September 1st.
I don't know what they have for inventory of all these species, so I'd say the sooner the better.
But that, I guess I'm trying to be clear, it does not need to come back to us.
No.
Yeah, my 2 cents would be that since the majority of the trees are on gamage, that grouping them together so you get the most visible grouping and don't have them sprinkled down the street. And I just move forward, let the forester pick which 25 he wants to do this year, and then figure out how you might phase that going forward to finish the project.
so did you also want me to try and reach out to Rick Shea about the meeting?
I can do that tomorrow. He was aware that this was, you know, we let the tree board members know this was happening today.
Okay, so is that, I think that covers all of the forest board updates, and then there's the, I think the email went around, but the best management practices workshop has been rescheduled for October 4th.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to come, you just need my email to update that?
Yes, I made a little, so that it can be posted
No,
and reposted. I will be around October 4th, I should be at a conference in Boston. But the only thing missing was Dave's contact. So
I can give you that, give you just that.
Yeah,
I think I responded to the email was on there.
okay. If you responded then, but I was just on Mr. Keene somehow my computer decided that there were 3 days that all I got was Spain.
So to that announcement, that attachment from the email, all we need to do is add his contact info
Right.
and send it to Liz.
To Tony, that's my confusion, maybe Tony does. So Tony, I don't know if you know, we were both told, I always thought I had to go through Jordan went to Liz, but you got a thank you, a very nice note from Liz after, and I guess we're supposed to go to you. So is it okay if I go directly to him without going through?
Yeah.
Okay. And you apparently take it to Liz or
This is
do your
for
magic. Any
posts
post on
and stuff.
Facebook, any post that the city puts on Facebook or alert me, so that, but we want to get this out so that the public will come early. So based on Dave's stuff, I did a save the date little thing that should become a JPEG, so we can just post it on Facebook.
That's fine.
Thank you.
And then we'll try and repost it again,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, maybe what we can do is space them out and say, okay, this one's early because it's October, so we probably need to.
Okay, so move back to our agenda here. So continuing on with subcommittee updates, as long as no one has any other questions for us, Cory? Okay. So the Littlefield Dam and this grant opportunity, I've talked with Bjorn and I attended the online webinar and I spoke with the city manager, and we're gonna end up bypassing this opportunity because before we were planning on a 2-to-1 funding ratio match, so, about 66% of the money would come from the grant, we would be responsible for the remainder, and that was about $170,000, and this grant through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is a 1-to-1, so we have to come up with $250,000, and considering that we haven't gotten, as much alignment as we hoped for, I think they're still working on, city staff and city manager coordinating with the consultants to see what services they provide. It's just not enough time to try and line up an additional $80,000 in funding. And if, I want to make sure that if we go after this really ambitious project, that it's done properly and not rushed and trying to scrape together money that we don't have during the project. So the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation was a little ambitious for this grant, but they do have some smaller grant programs that are regional, that don't have such a wide calling on a national scale. So we're still going to be doing the groundwork, the city manager, Eric Cousins, myself, and Bjorn, to align what we can for stakeholders and funding, so that when we see either another national opportunity with NOAA or another agency or a smaller scale, more regional funding opportunity, that we can hit the ground running. But yeah, so we're not going to go after the NIF with one.
I had a feeling that's how it was
Yeah, and that's steep.
I know, that's so annoying.
Yeah.
Especially for our first time of trying to get.
Well, then you're running out of time, because that has to.
Yeah, they announced it with a month to put together a full proposal, which is like a 35 to 40 page proposal on its own to type up, let alone to try and get people on board. Peter, the city manager, suggested that we continue having these meetings. I think we're going to meet again towards the beginning of fall to figure out where we're at in terms of gaining stakeholders, and then maybe have a meeting with the city council, not asking, can we have money or can we go after this, but
An education.
basically an educational thing and kind of a where we're at, do we have support to keep moving forward? Again, all laying groundwork kind of stuff. So it's good that we have the support and we're doing the groundwork. Hopefully the money will come. It'll probably be like a next year funding cycle that we'll have to try and hit. But
One of the things that did not come up during the public presentations by us, and I haven't seen anything since, except I thought there was an article in the paper or something. So what happens if what's the city's plan if the Littlefield Dam breaks apart?
breaches.
Breaches,
Right.
thank you.
Well, it is
Because-
breached.
right, but
Comes
worse,
down,
worse.
Right.
And we didn't hear that they have a plan, maybe, I assume that they do, but I don't know if that's even your department's
I've
territory.
never seen it.
So
But that's a pretty scary thing when we see some of these
Right.
quick floodings in all sorts of parts of the country. You know, do we
Years
have, all I'd like
ago,
to know is we have
yeah.
a plan in place. Even if it can't fully be executed, but, you know, not like, oh, we didn't expect this.
Well, and then it's whatever we have for dam management for the lower Barker Dam, because that's gonna really control the downward flow of water. And so between Littlefield and Lower Barker, you can't control the water.
So I don't
So
know
it
what
would-
kind of dam, sorry.
Yeah.
did I cut you off?
No, I was just saying that would take the brunt of the water coming
Right.
down, and then the state
Not to
holders
mention
on the
debris.
side.
Yes, the debris that I actually was more concerned about based on
All
our
those
discussion
cars
of
and-
that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
chunks of concrete
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, I don't know what kind of emergency preparedness plan we have specific to dams. It's, I imagine, so it's not owned by the city of Auburn, it's still owned by Martindale.
Right.
Um,
But we're
and-
gonna live with the consequences.
Right, and we're gonna look at consequences, and Auburn would be responsible for obviously the emergency management services like fire and rescue anyway. So I'm not sure if there is a plan in place. I can talk to.
Would you ask that question?
And
I'm
suggest
almost
that
certain there
maybe,
isn't.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm almost certain there isn't, because years ago, my father owns, we have Dad's bait shop, there's a dam there, and it's private dam, so the city has nothing to do with that. So I wanted him, because my safety background, to come with me up to NEMA, they had a big conference, talking about all the different dam waterways up and down the Androscoggin and the estuaries that follow from it, so that he could learn a little bit about emergency action plans, like what do you do in floods, if we get another big flood, you know,
Right.
what can you do to help the city control water from your
Mhm.
end? And when we reviewed all that, Littlefield Dam was not even part of that. It's like Augusta didn't even have it on the map, even then, it wasn't even part of that. I paid very close attention to that. They didn't even know there was a dam at the bait shop controlling all the water from Taylor Pond into Taylor Brook. They had no idea there was even a dam controlling any of that. So,
I'm hoping that maybe there's one existing, I mean, if not for Lower Barker, there's certainly one for, Three
Yeah.
Falls Dam.
But
there
it
that
may
maybe
be
we could at
within
least
certain.
quickly adapt
Right.
to Littlefield. Hopefully that would be something that we could do quickly in the meantime, because like you said,
So I guess that's where because I think
Yeah.
she's correct. But the city has to have some kind of
Right.
emergency planning besides just calling the county, what is her name, Joanne?
yeah.
Poppin, maybe? The head of the emergency management that sends all the notices.
Yeah.
And as a city councilor in the spring, you get regular notices from her because of the potential flooding. So they're on top of it, and then it seems to go away after flood season. But there is that group, but I guess we should start right with the city, is to ask for, what's our plan? Can we review the pages? Not that we're going to do anything, but
right.
that will sort of force the question of not do, well, we think we have one. Because too often, we hear, well, we think we have one, and then we don't. And if the city of Auburn doesn't have one, surely the Androscoggin Emergency Management, whatever group,
Yeah.
would have something. And you're right, if there's nothing but the big guy out here, we should be looking.
Well, they just redid all the flood zones again, 'cause my
Right.
property's right on flood zones.
Yeah.
My property's gone back and forth between part of it being in a flood zone, part of it not, which I don't want to get into that, it drives me crazy.
A lot of New
But
Auburn
it was
has
all
that same
redone
problem.
just a couple of years ago, and a lot of it was taking out of the floodplain. So I
In
think
your
if we
area, in
have-
New Auburn, though, it added a whole bunch of places.
Yeah, I think if the city has an emergency plan for that, I guess is what I'm saying, is I would start with Lower Barker and then above
Basically
Littlefield
inventory.
of city dams, because they'll have that. But any private owned dam is not gonna be part of your emergency plan anyway,
Right.
because,
Well, that's what I was thinking. I don't know if there, I mean, granted, Auburn would be responsible for the actual services themselves. I don't think because they don't really have one, but I'll check with, I guess I'll reach out to Eric and the city manager also, Peter.
Yeah, Eric would probably be the most likely because he just does the floodplain
I feel like I can ask Eric about everything. He's such a
source.
valuable
Yeah.
resource for us.
Well, the other part, you mentioned, well, they wouldn't have a plan for the private ones, which I would agree with, it's not their job, but they're going to have to live with the consequences.
Exactly.
So, like it or not, we need to have a plan for them, and if they don't even know that there are private dams along the segment she's talking about.
Those are good.
part of those plans should be the volume of water study should be done?
So-
This breaches at spring versus winter, so you have best case and worst case.
I've actually done a couple of maps for my previous job where you map out, it's basically calculated from the dam height, and then you use LiDAR data to follow contours. It's like a mathematical calculation. You figure out what that volume of water would be and like what it would cover, and then you can add in your parcels and your building data to figure out what properties would be impacted. And I mean, it's pretty, like, I was able to do it, and it's low impact for a small dam, so it's something that the GIS office may be able to do, you know, if we don't already have that. So I could also maybe talk to Rosemary too.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions.
And you guys keep bringing up the part I care about the most, which is the refuse, all the trash and all
Well,
that.
and I see that if we don't do something under our control soon, after what I've seen happen over the years, it's a matter of time. It could be this
Yeah.
winter. We have another really bad winter where that river dams up with ice, and you get these sheets that let go, that dam will
Do
come
we
down on its
know-
own.
Sorry. Do we know whose responsibility it would be? Would it be the individual who owns the dam, or would it be the individual property owners that the debris goes onto to actually remove the debris?
Comes
Well,
in
the
the codes,
liability
yeah.
falls on the owner, which is why the city of Auburn doesn't want to accept it as a donation
Until we're gonna take it down.
until we're gonna take it down. So right now, liability, and I don't know exactly what's included, I guess, in liability,
Right.
kind of sounds like your question, but the liability does fall on Martindale.
So if there's damages, they would be responsible, but to actually remove the debris, I don't know, either homeowners insurance or individuals would be responsible. I think it's a way that we can prod our discussion that could really get a lot of residents interested in supporting us. You know,
Right,
to
not-
bring up
yeah.
the.
Like, oh, well, if there's not even a, safety plan, maybe we should take them out and they'll
Right.
be in favor of it, yeah.
Not to try to rile
Right.
people
That's
up,
a-
but it's
no.
a real problem that a lot of people. along the
Yeah,
way
they
might have.
should know if they're, potentially in that path of damage.
Well, and you brought up the point of, not that we're going to do it for them, but if we can prepare an education component for them. I know, speaking from my sewer experience, that I used the opportunity many times to explain that backflow stops with the residents' problem, not the sewer district's problem. You only need one backup to learn that lesson, but it's a lot nicer to talk to them and remind them to please check to see if you have one, because I wouldn't know if I had one without having bought one, and those kind of things. So you mentioned homeowners, and I think there's an issue about flooding, whether it's covered or not covered, if it's a consequence of flooding. So that's a good education component, which is, I know, way down here on the list, but you're right, that's what will get residents interested. We have to start here, is there a plan? What do we do? What are the components? But way down here should be, take advantage of this opportunity.
It's definitely a trickle down and trickle up.
There's a lot of stakeholders in there besides just the residents that doesn't see it. So, the MWAP there, their drainage pipe. There's a drainage pipe there, and there's a couple different culverts, which I know in the past, I think they used to suck water as a coolant system out of the river. I don't know if they still do that, but those culverts, depending on the water level, are half submerged or not submerged. So there's, again, you've got backflow now, water going up there. What does that do to our whole entire?
And
That's a
what-
pretty big stakeholder. I mean, you could,
And that converts to the city of Auburn, but now we have 26% owner of MWAC, but it's a big number.
and do
But the
they have
number
an
one-
action plan if the river rises? I mean, maybe they have their own action plan, they're all set. These are all.
They probably do, because I'm sure that there's at least state level oversight on that being that type of facility. They would definitely have to have some kind of instrument to the state. But
I would like to
we'll
hope so,
definitely
but I don't
envelop
know.
them.
I know, I
Oh,
don't
I know,
like
there's things they
assume
should do, but
anything
there's a lot of
is-
stuff that should happen.
Well,
Yeah.
and my geography is really bad, so, like when you say South Auburn, I really need to know what street. So based on where the Littlefield Dam is, would it have an impact on the junkyards that are
Oh,
along the river?
yeah, absolutely.
Because we already know, I'm looking at you, because
Yeah,
I know
was
which
it
one I'm gonna
Randy's
talk about, right?
junkyard?
We already know one that is consistently
Dropping
non-compliant.
buses in the river, like the one that's half submerged right now.
Well, I wasn't thinking that, I was thinking of
Tires.
the tire,
All of that
And
stuff is gonna come
that
down.
department has worked very hard, I know,
Yeah.
leaned heavily.
Well,
Well-
he's only out of the water right now, probably what, 5 feet? That
He is
whole,
five.
all of that is probably only out 5 feet.
Well, I do want to
And
emphasize,
he's very close to that Littlefield Dam,
the
so.
Littlefield Dam doesn't impound water, it's already breached, water
Yeah,
goes around it. So a release of that dam would come from a high precipitation event, which would be the primary driver for flooding, not the
Right.
breach release. You're more concerned about the giant chunks of concrete that
Right.
will wash down.
Yeah.
And then-
And the stuff behind,
Right.
and whatever causes it is, right now, it's managed by going around
Right.
and reasonable flow in that. But if there is an event, when I talk about breaching, I'm
Right.
talking about the crumbling and.
Yeah.
There definitely would be some additional water flow because that's.
And that's a particular area of concern because they already have had flooding issues. And it's only one of the list of junkyards that the city talks about. There's only one that's been a challenge. And I'm sure if what you tell us about how the water flows, that's going to be a big mess.
I think this will all
It's the
be good
debris
to
getting
start
jumped up.
talking
If the
about.
breach is on the edge of the dam, that's where it is.
It's in the
Yeah.
middle. Well, it's breached open, looking up at the dam, I guess I should say. On the right-hand side, the water is able to come down at certain
So I'm
water
thinking if
levels.
it's on the side, it's more apt to go around the dam and cut the bank.
Right, but right now,
Take out
there's
the
this
rest of
gaping
it.
hole that I keep taking time-lapse photography
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, it's
That
far
is
around
eating,
it.
and that's all the rebar, the stack pipes and all the little pieces in there, so rebar's all exposed. So then you have this crumbling big chunks,
Right.
and if it barricades around that pipe to MLAP or whatever, and things like that, as the debris coming down.
I've seen a place up in Skowhegan a few years ago where a culvert plugged, and a section of road as big volume as this room was gone.
Yeah,
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
So I think the next step will be, talk to them about that emergency action plan when we have, kind of do an inventory, at least for Littlefield Dam, since it's kind of project related, but hopefully that can spread to a wider discussion about what kind of emergency action plans there are for other privately owned small dams. So I think that's a good coverage of the Littlefield Dam update. Let's move on to the Park Subcommittee update.
Okay, so parks, the meeting you all were invited to was canceled because of low numbers. And when we look at our calendar for the coming year and parks and other, normally the second Monday of a month would work great, except if the second Monday follows the 4th of July holiday. So we should all remember that. It was canceled and going to be rescheduled likely fall. It will not be August because there isn't sufficient time. So I know we have to start again, but as soon as we know, we'll ask you for a save the date as well. Pettingill, at our last meeting, and we didn't have the meeting, so this has not been presented to Parks, but since the chair there was concerned in here, I think I have copies for everybody, but maybe you can share. My report's only on one side, I tend to use scrap paper, but so I went down to Pettingill because there was the issue about the trees. The issues of the trees. So everybody was correct of the type of tree because there were actually 3 trees in front of the building. And the talk was that they were going to take the trees down to create more parking. So the first thing I did was find out that, yes, in fact, we have 3 trees, so we were all correct on the type. But the second thing is, if the need for parking is there, well, we need to look around. And I have about 30 pictures. It turns out I can't electronically send this because it's too big, so I may take them out and send them separately. But they were talking about 2 types of parking, but the primary one that I heard the most was parking near the senior community center, because the community center is a building that hopefully will be used by others than just a small group. And there's plenty of opportunity for parking around that. I took some major parts of it, but there's a whole plot section just beyond. If you're going through the park and going up the hill, so the last thing you see in the park on the right-hand side is the new senior community center. There is space nicely plowed and maintained, or mowed and maintained by the city, and then there's some that it's maintained, but it's bushes. there is sufficient space for a parking lot there, and there's a cutout, that's what I wanted to show you. There's a cutout in the road, so it was intended to do something. Right beside the building that you can see in maybe this picture, it looks like a driveway, but it's 2+ car lengths wide, nothing there, and you can go all the way back, so you could put perpendicular parking to the building. Then I walked around the properties and got lots more photos of places you can stick parking, some of which is just not being used at the moment. They've got equipment in it, like there's 3 parking spaces at the end of the building that has some piece of equipment in it. I took pictures of some of the equipment that seems to be laying around, the grass and flowers are growing up against. I question whether they're trash, useful pieces of equipment, because if they're useful, they're not being well protected, just sort of laying out there. So I'm hoping that maybe the chair can share with the Parks and Rec Advisory that before anything happens in a park, that we look carefully at other opportunities than cutting down those 3 trees. The third thing I did while I was there, because some of you know I'm on a pedestrian safety week project, was I looked at the crosswalks. The pictures in black and white, these are colored pictures, which looks much better, but I don't have a colored picture. Pretty much the sidewalk that's in the park has faded, more than half of it. It's used every day. And the closer you get to the building, because it should line up, and there's no parking spaces in the park, but the crosswalk doesn't have. So the crosswalk needs painting, and it should be painted when children are there every day of the week right now. There is no crosswalk up at the Senior Community Center, so when they talk about taking down the trees to create more parking on the Hasty Ingersoll side of the building, there's no sidewalk either, so now you're going to take out the grass and stuff like the sidewalks on the other side. But there's also no crosswalk up at the senior center. So again, contiguous sidewalks are my pet peeve. I went all the way up because actually the day I went to do this, the day before, I had been in the park, and I come from, is that Summer or Winter that turn into the park? Is that Winter Street or Summer Street? Winter. So I take a right-hand turn from Winter into the park. Most people would be taking a left-hand turn because they're coming from the Denison side up that way. And fortunately, because I was paying attention to signs and other things, I was going really slow. There was a guy in a motorized wheelchair thing, and you cannot see, and I've got photos of that. So when I was in there doing all this crosswalk stuff, I thought, okay, why was he there? Well, the first thing is that I don't know, it's a question I'm asking. The sidewalk looks really narrow on the sidewalk side, which is on the baseball side, so you would not have this problem. But it looks really narrow. But the most important thing is at the top, so of the side, at the top of the hill, where you would come into the park, there's no access for the wheelchair. You have to go down a building plus and go in somebody's driveway to get to the sidewalk that goes down. So that explained why the guy in the wheelchair wasn't on the sidewalk, but as a result, instead of having the lesson of walking against traffic, he was riding with us. So sidewalks were the third thing. So my summary is, I don't see why those trees need to come down. Before they cut down a tree, I hope that forestry and others might speak up. And while they're there, they ought to look at safety things like crosswalks and access. That's 2 on the list.
So, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, were you motioning that the chair submit a recommendation to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board that they review alternate locations before cutting, or was that just informal suggestion?
It was a suggestion because I don't think that Parks and Rec has taken it up. I think it got reported to them. I don't have enough information to be insistent, but maybe there could be a dialogue between the 2 chairs of where this stands. And I'll bring, if I can figure out how to get you all the photographs, I just picked 2 or 3. And in color, it's very evident about crosswalks.
Who's the chair of that?
Dana Staples. And I gathered that tree issues, as I did say, well, that was like this probably is not, would this be something they should come before forest? Are those considered community trees?
Part of the community forest.
Okay, so again, before somebody cuts those down, I'm pleading on behalf
Yeah,
of
we
Ms.
weren't aware
Yashker.
that that was in the works.
Right, and you know what, that concerns me, that someplace, again,
These are
Mr. Keene says
beautiful
no
trees,
silos.
too. It's not like we're just taking down a 10-year-old
Right.
tree, like.
Right, and so how did this even get up with none of these people knowing that they're considering that? So I just don't want the tree to go.
Who makes those
I
decisions?
don't know. And is it already planned, and do we have any control
Do you
over
know
that?
anything about that?
There
Are
it
they
is.
putting you in the
Is-
project, on the spot?
No, the only thing we were involved in was actually like tracking, putting a picture on the GIS map of what the parking lot would look like, which would be where at least one tree is.
Mhm.
I know we carry, funding to take a tree out, to build a parking lot there.
So there's funding, thank you, there's funding in the current budget year?
Well, I don't know what the funding is, I'm just saying there's a cost
There was a
associated
proposal, okay.
to building a parking lot there, which would require removal of the tree and stuff.
So I don't know where to go next, except that the trees, but I only care about that big one. Trees should not be cut and a plan in place until there's been community input. And at a minimum, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, since that's a recreation facility, and the Parks Committee of Conservation, and the Forest Board, no, those, they all attach to those trees.
Once you take them down, you can't put them back.
That's right. And in a separate place in my life, on the age-friendly, of course, this discussion, because our meetings are held in this building, in the proposal that I put into the city as an I statement is, we have Ingersoll, we have Hastings, and we have the Senior Community Center, all buildings and public use places that are currently identified as being in the park. And by being in the park, you can't have alcohol. So if you want to rent any of those for adult type of activities, you're going to have the problem. We are Norway Savings Bank, because Ingersoll and Norway are both enterprise accounts, which means they're supposed to be at least breaking even, preferably make some money. The Ingersoll's at a great disadvantage when you have this kind of limitation. So my personal proposal that I said to the city manager was to have somebody look and maybe change the boundary of the park so that the park stays, for those of you who are familiar, come down over the hill off Summer Street, and the road turns by the softball field, and Ingersoll is directly in front of you, Hastings sits here, that at that turn, the park boundary changed. So it's only a park on the left side, and it's just city property on the right side, beginning with that turn, in order to open up potential business opportunities for those. I don't know what the manager will do about them, but that to me is a solution to helping, again, at a minimum, our enterprise account that's down there, there's a lot of park restrictions. You can't smoke or tobacco products at all in a park. So you think of public buildings, it's 25 feet, I believe. It's either 20 or 25 feet from any entrance. So you could create a smoking place, except that you can't now because that's all park, and so people are smoking in our parks. And so that's actually what triggered my conversation with the manager. So if we could reach out to those through the chairs about our trees, that would be helpful. As I mentioned, we did not do anything for Parks and Recreation Month, but as I was thinking about our annual report, we did last July do a photo contest in that, so we'll send those pictures because they were never really used by the city as part of our report. Cemeteries, an update because we're a work group of there. We already got a $100 matching donation to fix the planter up in Oak Hill. So if you have extra bottles or that, or you want to give $5, Jill Eastman's collecting the money, but we're over halfway there already. And we have not picked a date for our meeting. More likely than not, it will be September for our first meeting, because summers are a hard time. I met with the co-chair while we were in Gettysburg together. We came separately in that, and it's just summers are hard, so we probably won't hold our first meeting until September.
Now, did you get any, do you know if you've got any interest in joining? Because she did get that on there. I mean, I got the alert me for members.
Members on cemetery?
Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay, Parks and Recs is in different, okay. I was
Right.
being
Parts,
polite.
but-
So
I know.
nothing's changed. I got the old one. I just didn't get it copied today to put in the dates because for final, okay, if we let it
Yeah.
go by our chair, because that's who should do it. But we're just going to take the same one they did at the beginning. And he got the same answer. It's the same answer, is, well, they don't know. In the email that the manager said, well, we need to know this information.
Oh my
In it,
gosh.
right? In it, in the report, in the email.
Well,
he
you
said-
sent that to them at least twice now. The
Yeah.
information they were looking for, who's the chair, who's on it, and it's
Wow.
weird.
Now, I will be nice, because when we get to open, I will be nicer than I usually am. Because in fairness to the city, if I want to be fair, I went to our conservation page because I wanted to get your piece of paper from last month to use it, and it wasn't there. Our conservation page needs to be updated, but Parks is even worse. They don't have anything on our Parks page. And I can tell you that as secretary, co-chair of Parks, I've got all the history, so with your permission, I'll just send it. I don't know where you go from there, but I'll make sure you have all the stuff, so you don't have to do any work on it. But that would explain, if I want to be nice, maybe they keep asking the question because the page isn't updated. If I want to be not so nice, I can tell you when we closed out our first year, all the documents went together to conservation and to the city clerk and to whoever. But we will follow up. That's our part.
Thank you. So, we already did the Forest Board, the LA Trails Group.
Still waiting for Andrew Scotty Land Trust to be calm enough to have time to organize it. I did send Shelley an email at the end of last week, kind of volunteering to really help him coordinate it to try and get it moving again. So no progress yet, but hopefully soon.
Is there anything, I mean, if they're busy and they don't have time, that's one thing, but is there anything that we
Yeah.
could do to help, or?
I don't think so. I think at this point it's probably going to be early fall
Yeah.
when they're like everybody else, really busy in the summer. So.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Can we be sure though we list, because even though it's only a work group, it's doing work, and we make sure on our subcommittees that we have that trails work on this page?
Well, I have the LA Trails.
No, I meant on our.
On our webpage,
Yeah, on our
gotcha.
webpage.
Yeah, not the agenda.
Because I was talking to somebody and they didn't know about the work that you've been doing and that others have been doing, and I said, oh, well, if you want to get engaged, call Ed.
I want to use one.
Thank
you, David.
Thanks.
Nice to see you.
So the last subcommittee kind of project update is the ag zone, and there is quite the update for that.
I was on commission unavailable for a good part of the month, so that all I know about really is what was reported in the paper. And that was, sounded like the council wanted something to happen quickly, but there was a division of opinion as to what that might be. Does anyone else have more information?
So
I was at the meeting. Were you at the meeting?
I was not at the meeting, but Mr. King sent me the final report, and I skimmed it over and kind of picked out the most details, and it almost sounds like they reported what we suggested. They want to finalize a committee that can oversee as this project. They want a permanent committee that can continue doing this work, and that they eliminate the 50% income rule, but that research needs to be done on more appropriate, formula for that. So they recommend that research be done. It basically kind of sounds like they're in agreement with us that they didn't want to make a rush decision, but wanted to see the work continue in a more permanent fashion.
Yeah, no, that's what I got too, and they wanted a working committee, and there was pushback. Well, what do you need a working committee? It's like, well, wait a minute.
Were you at the meeting? Is that-
No,
oh.
but I've heard from all
Yeah.
that, and so I'm not understanding why they can't have a working committee.
So I was at the meeting, but I wasn't there for the entire piece of it. I came in towards the end when the chair and two other people were sitting at the table. The mayor thanked him because the current Egg Zone and Natural Resources committee is finished, the work that they were charged with, which which was to come to the consultant's recommendation and present a report. During the first public part of the open session, the first open session, there were lots of people who came forward again, having to do with the ag zone, and it was a mayor's appointed committee, and to me, the impression left was that the mayor will do something. The what was not defined, but it's going to be mayor action at this point, although the city council has the authority. And you're absolutely right, they want some kind of, the recommendations included, some kind of standing, I use the word standing committee. Because I've suggested whenever they start, instead of, again, creating something in ordinance they don't have any experience to know what the demand will be, is to follow our process. Start with the work group.
Right.
Why not start with a work group under this group? If we have an economic and community development committee, that would be another good place to put it, but we don't have such a thing in Auburn. But start here and, you can incubate here and then grow into whatever it's supposed to be.
Is that a recommendation that we could actually make? Because I think the paper I quoted the mayor as saying that he was not in support of a permanent committee.
Right.
So, if this board suggested that.
That would be a good idea, is to just say, well, you're waiting.
Fine.
Just sign a little work group,
Yeah.
stick it under us. We clearly let our committees do great work on their own. Dave's forestry board's a great example. Until such times as I'd support that recommendation.
So, Shelley, is that
Need a motion?
motion?
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I make a motion that, is it the mayor's office that we're making this recommendation to? Okay, that we would make a recommendation to the mayor's office that is it a working
Work group.
a work group for ag be established to continue the work of the committee that just was disbanded, and that it would be under this, under the Conservation Commission.
And they would
Until
go
such
through
time
the
as they,
90-day period, trial
yeah,
period.
well, then you could add that as the part two of this is what happens when you're a work group under us. And at any point, he can then pull it out, but I'm going to second her motion to move it along.
Would both of you be willing to defer action on that until we get a little bit deeper? Because basically Ben and I were talking.
Oh, absolutely.
Not talking about the possibility, but well, first defining what a group is.
Ah,
Yeah.
so maybe,
Yeah,
maybe wait
so-
a month.
No, I'm not sure, but there may be some action that should be taken now or not, but I mean, as far as acting on that motion, at least for a few minutes anyway.
I don't know what it's called, but as a courtesy, I would suspend our discussion on this until after they come up with their report before we took a vote on whatever we're going to do. I don't know the formal way to do that, so.
Yeah, but we have,
So we want to define, you're suggesting we define what a work group is under the Conservation Commission before we recommend that someone make a work group. Am I following correctly?
Yeah,
Okay.
at the last meeting, we talked about kind of defining the differences between a subcommittee and a work group. And we're not all the way done with that yet, but there's some progress. And we can get that progress, I think we can get that done before the next meeting.
Would you
Because
recommend
It seems like
that?
it's fairly, urgent, I guess, to get this recommendation to the mayor, because who knows what could happen.
Right. Well, I guess that is my concern based on some community conversations that I'm hearing from farmers and that are concerned that either the mayor or everybody else is predisposed to a particular way. And people talking to me actually live in the ag zone, so they're more concerned like what's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
So I would only ask, do you think that we can wait a month?
no.
Or basically?
No, I think we need to take some action, but at least maybe put a few other things on the table to decide before acting on a particular one.
That's what I want to know, is what,
Tonight at this meeting, you're saying, or,
Yeah.
because I was going to
And
suggest.
then before the meeting is over, we can decide
I think that's a great idea.
what would be the best option.
Yeah.
Because I get the sense, feeling that, if they want to do something, they want to do it quick.
It sounds like we should.
And I almost think, we need to have some option to suggest that at least be a part of consideration.
I would agree with you, and I think that there is urgency, and I think the mayor will take action.
Yeah.
And I would use the word quickly.
And I do have serious reservations about either the mayor or the council having control of the content of the committee.
Well, that could
That's not on the record, see?
part of our suggestion could be that maybe we have some say in the membership, that we'd like to, I don't know, if that's a possibility.
What was your comment?
Is it possible that as part of our recommendation to the mayor's office that we might even suggest individuals to be on the committee or the work group?
Well, one thing that I had read in the report, there was actually a suggestion for the structure of that permanent committee. They wanted, and basically suggesting that it consists primarily of residents of that zone or people who are
Like stakeholders,
agricultural,
yeah.
who work as farmers in Auburn or are experts of one of those fields. I think it would be good to retain that so that people
Yeah.
who live there have that
But
say.
not to the I guess I'll take the other side of it,
Yeah.
only because I felt that way until I had a conversation with someone else who didn't live in the egg zone and said, whatever happens in our egg zone affects all of us.
Right.
So people on Court Street and University Street and that are as affected if we make dramatic changes in our egg zone. And the one that just closed was really made up of only agricultural people, or a couple. Mary Sylvester, who ended up chair, was in the watershed, so she lived in, if not agricultural, the natural resources.
Well, that's why I would suggest keeping the recommendation of if you're an expert and if you work in like natural resource, like you're a professional forester, I think they would allow you a place or at least the option to be voted on. So yeah, I agree. Not made up solely of residents, but also.
Well, I wasn't thinking of just residents
Right.
in the egg
No,
zone.
I agree with you, Tiz. I think there's a danger in having people who either it's their livelihood or they want to make money by being able to develop their property differently as the decision makers for what's happening with the agricultural land in the community.
It should be a mix.
So it should be a mix.
So our recommendation
Members.
could be that whatever he does, that it be a mix. It represents all segments of the city, and that there are experts that may not live on the land or live in it, but that they can contribute to it. The other thing is, if they're successful, I would not expect this entity to stay under us, because if they really did all that they would hope to accomplish, they should outgrow us in the
Be their
sense
own
of
committee
be
eventually.
their own, but not start there.
I think they just, it seems like they need a little support and some backup. I
Yeah.
feel like you're getting nowhere,
Yeah.
and maybe that will help them.
So this is all table my motion until we continue our meeting.
Okay, until we, so we'll
So-
reevaluate at the
so-
end of tonight's meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Because I have one more suggestion that we could make the motion just pending their definition, and if they're able to send that, I don't know if it counts as like business since we're not voting, but if they could send that to me before, like if they get it done next week, and we have that definition.
That I think is a good discussion maybe to have,
Right.
when, were you gonna discuss this evening, this?
Yeah.
I was thinking that if the group doesn't feel that we need to all weigh in, if we want to, if you're being deputized to make the decision as to what those definitions are on behalf of the commission, I mean, I would be comfortable with what
Well,
the two
we
of you
can
come up
send it
with.
around, and if anybody has strong objections, you can just email and,
Yeah.
Yeah, your name.
discuss that way.
So could we take
Certain
it out of
actions
order
we
and
can
take them
take,
next? so
we
that
can
my
take
wording
as a commission,
moves
and there are
logically?
other actions that they think we could have to recommend. They not. Anyway, the definition we talked about, first, everybody, we've been talking work groups, but nobody doesn't have a common understanding what a group is. To just start discussion, as a definition of work group, a group of people working together toward a common objective.
Okay, I'd agree with that first. That's true though of subcommittee and us. I like that.
That would be a definition that this commission accepts as any work group that we might name or might recommend be named.
I agree that that's one of the elements of one. I think that we definitely need that, and we should repeat it on our standing committees, subcommittees.
Yeah. And then really as a adjunct to that, when we name a work group or a work group is named, try to include enough of a description in the title so that people know exactly what that common objective might be. So, you know, for example, we talked about at last meeting, something forestry related, that sort of thing, and essentially possibility of a work group, which basically would be forest, wildlife, and open space.
So you said open spaces, because.
And because those three things are very closely related, and yet if we only selected one of those three as a name, everything else gets lost.
Mhm.
And there might be, multiple interests, but basically under a common heading because the common thread is there.
And you mentioned that last month, which I think is a good idea, because you mentioned it about parks. So if you look at the narrative that was created when parks was created, it talks about cemeteries and open spaces, and then you said, but I didn't recall that because it's not in our name. It's not in our name. And in some cases, the description you just did, so open spaces would be one we have to think of, but the first two words definitely go well together, is that the title of the committee should be as comprehensive as possible. But the follow-up to that is, and again, thinking of parks as the example, the statement, whatever the next requirement is, that it be clear in what its direction is. So in the documentation for parks, there's a sentence, I wish I had thought about looking this all up. There's a sentence on its description that uses the three words, parks, cemeteries, and open spaces, in the narrative of describing what the park subcommittee. But I don't remember when we did that. I look at all of us because we've all been around some. I don't know when that happened, but we could go back and look it up. But that's part of the narrative of parks. I don't know if trails had a narrative because.
We had a goal at the beginning.
I'm sorry?
We had a goal at the beginning.
Yeah, and that to me is the second thing on the list. The first is the sentence you just read as an objective. And the second is that it has a specific goal with a champion, because otherwise they don't go anywhere.
I think the more specific narrative is really great for our more permanent subcommittees, but I don't want to take away the flexibility that we've given work groups by pigeonholing them too much. So giving like a general description, but allowing them to go beyond that, if that's where the work group goes, because it is so.
From our conversations before about the work groups and subcommittees, some of the biggest differences are the work group is less formal, members aren't appointed, it's kind of.
It's temporary.
It could be temporary or could develop into a subcommittee.
Right, but that's when it becomes a subcommittee.
And the thing is, it would have the flexibility to, if they find the niche that nobody thought of but needs to be explored, they've got the flexibility to do it. Whereas if you've got a formal subcommittee, then they may be feel bound within those limits. I think that was one of the portions of the rationale we were trying to get to, because, as a second group, just thinking back to the ag group, basically would be, forest is a very important portion, but basically the forest, wildlife and open space, a lot of people don't think of wildlife in that context of forest and open space, but it's essential for wildlife.
Yeah.
And as far as ag is concerned, agriculture and marketing, because basically if you produce and can't market, you're not successful. And essentially those were key ingredients that the consultant surfaced in his report, basically to reference forest and that sort of thing, and the amount that's in forest in that zone. And it's the same thing with the use of the productive land, and try to market it, which basically marketing, is one of his strongest recommendations.
Yeah, it was. And it was interesting because whenever I stopped going, when I realized they really weren't going to talk about natural resources, and yet when I talked to the consultant, he called me, he said, well, we do talk about natural resources, we talk about forestry. And I said, well, forestry is, to me, a job. It's like agricultural. It's not, I think it is a production, like farming. So I didn't see forests as being natural resources. I'm worried about water and wetlands and that kind of thing. And they, in my opinion, they didn't cover that in the ag zone stuff. They left it on the focus on what you're talking about, agriculture and forest as, to me, a production.
Right, and I think, the third leg that is really needed for constructive discussion and real progress in that area is basically an independent academic review of the National Resources Zone from the mid-'80s to current, which basically picks up the University of Maine Farmington and carries it on, because there are a lot of changes that occurred during that period which really haven't been independently documented, and really what is called currently ag zone or natural resources, whatever you want to call it, is a different body of land than it was in the mid-1980s, because they split off a bunch of smaller uses. But unless that's independently identified, and how many acres are involved, and what the result was, and that sort of thing, no one can make any intelligent decisions.
Oh, so in our zoning, I know we have something called rural residential, and there are like three that
urban
are
residential,
right. But
yeah.
so what you're talking about is when those changes happen, which allows you to build in what I would call that happened and never got the documentation.
The originally was a rural residential zone in the initial ordinance, but the thing of it is that has been amended or expanded or that sort of thing, and that documentation and how much was involved and what the result was don't have. And also there's a high density.
That's
something
but that's not.
Which is another one that was split off, and it was done legally.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is, there is no independent record of what the result was, and so really, if you're going to take a look at land use, you have to take a look at zoning, and then you have to look at what's happened to make sound judgments for the future.
Absolutely.
And that's really more complex than the council wants to think about, but those are the factors that need to be addressed. And at least I would think we could recommend, possibly recommend, basically, that they, encourage some sort of action for an independent academic review, and that we could take a position of the commission here if you so want, if the majority so wanted to. And because that's one of the foundations. And as far as some of the other things that are really independent actions that we could take as a commission, we could define work group if we wanted to, because we have the authority to do so. If we wanted to consider the naming of a work group, two work groups, such as we noted, we could basically, and if we voted to consider the whatever, it plants the seed, but it doesn't really bind us for any future action. And I don't feel strongly about that right now, but I think those are part of the, it needs to be part of the dialogue, really. And the other thing that's independent, but really was brought to mind early in the meeting, basically with the forest discussion and with the Littlefield Dam and that sort of thing. Who know outside this group, other than just a handful, who knows anything about those things? And we come right back to what we were talking earlier about PR, which, have you made a contact with that?
I did.
You did, okay, good.
I just sent it earlier this week when I was reviewing my homework, so I've not gotten a response back yet, but I did.
Okay, because, you know, I think, you know, early in the year, the party was talking, you know, early August, so I would guess that, you know, if the opportunity was going to occur, it would need to be soon. But, you know, that's good, because that really, the first two, the Littlefield Dam and the forest situation, just really brought up like a sore thumb, you know, how much needs to go on and how little knowledge the general public has. You know,
Well, even on the little thing like the trees, and
I know.
I mean, we're sitting here and we've got some pretty skilled people that should know if we're talking about taking down trees and building a parking lot, you know, in a park. So, yeah, your point was definitely in all three earlier discussions, the need.
No, I don't, you know, I know.
No, the need for it, what you're talking
I've tossed out a lot here, but, you know, I just wanted to get that into the dialogue, but, you know, I do think we could take action as a, you know, to at least define work group as we have, you know, as we want it to be. Either that, or we could hold that off to another meeting. You know, she's indicated she has the PR contact. The independent academic review, I wonder if that doesn't need to get presented to the council pretty quick. Well, before they make decisions.
I just wonder if they're going to be the decision maker. So
Huh?
I question whether the council is going to be the decision maker. I'm expecting a mayor's ad hoc committee out of the next step. Not that, I don't think we know for sure, but since the mayor can act quickly and the council acts more slowly, I was going to say deliberately would be a nicer word, more deliberately.
Well, you know, if any recommendation we make or suggestion goes to the mayor and the council, the mayor can act, but the council can act, and either positively or negatively.
I really like, so for me, you had two pieces in there. The definition of a work group, I think, and I wrote myself a notice to go back and write the element. I think there are more elements to our work groups than the couple defined. I think they're both 100% true in our numbers 1 and 2, but we also never create a work group that doesn't have a champion to start. So we could have more. So I'd like us to think about and send to you guys what we see as how we've developed, what specifics we have done. The part 2, though, the more important that you've identified, are things that definitely impact this whole idea of are we going to look at ag use, ag zone, agricultural as a committee. And you've got things listed on that page that no matter what we do should be part of our suggestion. Like the way you broke it down, I'm going to call it the fish and the other. You talked about in there, and you said something in marketing. And I agree, because that was part of what came out of that egg zone study. He did a lot of marketing ideas, and the summary for me comes down, if everybody would spend $5 a week from a local person, the community would be better off, our farmers would be better off. So, and that always that marketing piece. But then you said something else after, and I said, oh, that's a better word. So marketing is one element, but the other piece that didn't get addressed that keeps coming up, and when they spoke, we keep hearing two groups. We have the farmers, the people, farmers and foresters, to me they're the same. The people who grow things and do things. And those people we need to protect and preserve land to use for that. But the other group seems to be some of the same people who want to divide their land to have family, have workers, and the third to just develop and make some money because that's their retirement plan. I think that falls under, I would have put it with marketing, and I'd add the word economic. So economic development includes marketing, and includes this, I don't know what to call it, piece, you'll have a better word, but this idea that they want development in the ag zone. Not farming or forestry, but true more houses.
Which actually brings me back to what that particular segment is recommending. The precisely same elements that existed in the late 50s, early 60s, when the council really directed the planning board to zone initially because they wanted to curb urban sprawl, and basically that proposal that an individual resident made at the council meeting essentially is urban sprawl, because he described 80-odd house lots scattered randomly through the outskirts of Auburn.
Yeah.
That's exactly urban sprawl. And so the question is, do you want urban sprawl or don't you want urban sprawl?
And I worry that the changes they're talking about have not considered that question. They want development, so they want to sell houses, sell property to family members and to others, but they're not considering that. And Eric Cousins, more than 5 years ago, said that any house built in Auburn that was less than $200,000 was actually draining municipal resources.
And that basically is, was the on page 46 of the information presented to the council, was the information that the council, the consultant provided, which really showed the average profit loss for three groups, residential, business, and ag.
I do want to add too, the discussion about urban sprawl is really important when you want to include the natural resources in terms of, I think, forests for wildlife, wetlands, trees to sequester carbon, and all that stuff. And I feel like that's almost gotten kind of pushed aside, but it is important when you're talking about containing urban sprawl to focus not just on the economic pieces of the ag zone, but also the natural resource and open space concept of the ag zone.
But nobody has used the term urban sprawl.
Yep.
But that is perfectly well identified, and really all of the conservation groups should be willing to stand up and call it for what it is.
Yeah, and if we're
They aren't doing it.
if we're thinking about economic development that would assist people who are farming or producing products, then we should be looking at commercial developments such as wedding, barn facilities, those sort of rural things you would do on your property that would keep your property rural, not subdividing it into subdivisions. That's not what we want to be doing with that land.
Well, and the other thing is where we put the stuff, because again, I fear, I statement, that we're going to see urban sprawl everywhere. So again, I watch Blanchard Road change zoning, and I hope I don't live long enough for that poor guy out there with the fruit trees and animals to be pushed out because they smell pigs. Well, they wouldn't smell pigs if they hadn't reduced it from a 10-acre requirement to a 5. And he's going to lose because he's the small number on that road. So I see the worry, the urban sprawl all over the place. If there was a plan in this to take a select part of the city, and I'm going to pick on this part, so the council changed some zoning and roads out by Danville. Bouffard and McFarland are building some beautiful houses out there. If we're going to, don't go all over, if we're going to lose, at least don't lose all over town. Why not focus on agricultural land and natural resource land and that hold those requirements and use a small place out by the turnpike? Because that would create economic development. I can't tell you the impact on forest and farming, because people in Danville don't particularly farm now like they did, but start small. But you're right, it's the urban sprawl that I'm worried about. It's the 80 houses spread all over the 60% or 40% of our city.
But there again, I haven't heard that term used until the table has none.
Well, we,
And it's
let's
not-
throw it out
we're gonna use it.
And it's not in the paper, or the council discussion, so that's all.
I think this is a great discussion, but I
I know.
am kind of getting a little bit lost in what we need to do because there is that sense of urgency that
Yeah.
we've all expressed. So I kind of want to focus back again on how can we play a part in containing urban sprawl by potentially involving ourselves in this somehow. So I guess do we feel comfortable to open back up the discussion about what we can do and what recommendations
I
we
feel
can make?
good there, but I'm just trying to bring out a whole lot of random.
It's a better-
And I don't
Great
want to lose
conversation.
to me, you've got 3 elements on your page,
I've been trying.
what's a work group? How would you define an agricultural piece? And you had a third one, not just the egg thing. Maybe it's
The marketing.
well, yeah, but that's part of agriculture. He had a third piece on his page.
Might be in the forest.
Forest,
Yeah,
yes, thank you.
forest, wildlife,
Yes,
and open
yes,
space.
yes, that would be the third. So it was a pretty full list, and I just don't want to, I know one of those is this other piece, but I don't want to lose the other 2.
Just on a side note, it might be a good idea, because we spent like an hour on the subcommittee updates.
Do those at the
And
end.
we're really not, that's not our title of our committee, subcommittee updates. Maybe we can move that to the end of it, and then we can get some of the work done from the committee in the beginning of the meeting.
That's a good
Because I
idea.
think the subcommittee update should be a little more briefer.
Yeah.
I know some of the information is important, but maybe we can summarize that a little bit, because I feel like we're not doing work that we could be doing on the committee like we're doing right now. Maybe we should get that in the beginning, and then the subcommittees should be at the end.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
So I don't know if you want me to motion to change the minutes, but that would be helpful
Yeah,
because
I think we should.
it was a whole hour before we even, we spent an hour on the subcommittees.
Yeah, that's happened before, I thought of that.
So that was
An
last time, and I was like a
alternative-
little frustrated because I
Yeah.
really like the work that we do within
Yeah,
this
right.
group, which is why we're here, so.
Well, the other thing is
I've
we
also
can
thought
move
of
down and then
that.
make them written reports.
That's what I was
Just
gonna say, was have them emailed out before the meeting, and then we can all have read them, and if there's any comment on it, but then we can actually get down to kind of
Yeah.
business.
Part of the agenda packet is the subcommittees.
No, and if we didn't have the,
And I need a secretary to get those done for you.
Right, and that's part of the stuff
That's
that's
not
supposed to
your
vote
job.
for different people
Right,
and
that's
stuff,
not
and we
your-
had definitions and stuff we wanted to do, but we
Right.
can't get to it, we spent an hour on,
Yeah.
No, I
if
agree.
we, basically, if we had, as John suggests, take that approach, probably at least 3/4 of the subcommittee content would have been covered in some of the other subjects.
I think she moved it, right?
yeah, I
I'm
motion
gonna-
to change it.
in second.
Okay, all in favor?
And her recommendation included us to be briefer and written reports could be encouraged.
Ahead.
Ahead of the meeting.
Yeah, I would need them probably 2 weeks ahead of time so I can include them in the agenda
Right.
packet that I try and send out with you.
Right.
Okay.
Well, at least currently, I would move that the Conservation Commission define work group as a group of people working together toward a common objective. If we want to add to it or refine it later, we can, but at least that would get it out so that we're on the record of that approach.
I think that sounds really good.
So how does that differ from, using just that as the element of the definition, how does that differ from a subcommittee? That's my concern is, I think the
Well,
words are
basically,
great, but how do they differ?
A subcommittee essentially normally has a lot of criteria going with it, and you would define that later, but at least we have to have a definition, and, well, let's have a definition of a subcommittee. Basically is people appointed by some other group or that sort of thing.
I think the difference is
And
one is more
work-
temporary, one is more
and-
permanent.
That's what I'm saying.
work group
Could be the
is a
same
group.
exact stuff, but maybe you put in your verbiage that it's temporary
Right.
group of people working together. You don't have to put 90 days, just put temporary. As the subcommittee is the more permanent.
The goal part is also
Or
important.
It's what goal
Because-
is met, right?
Yeah,
So you have a
because it-
specific goal that you're working towards, and when it's met, you disband.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
I
it
don't think
becomes,
it'd
or
be-
it
I-
becomes permanent. But,
Because there's ongoing
Mhm.
work
Yeah,
that's that.
but
determined.
subcommittees and committees are formed around big issues.
Yeah.
The work groups are much more specific.
Yeah, so in this case with agriculture, the goal is to look at what the zoning policies are, whether there are changes that need to be made, whether there's research that needs to be done to be able to make those decisions and to move forward with a recommendation to the city council and the mayor. So that makes sense. So they have a specific goal of what they're supposed to be studying and trying to accomplish for.
Right, and when you have a subcommittee, it tends to become permanent, and, you know, when its purpose has been accomplished, it's very seldom that you see any subcommittees dissolved.
Although, yeah, I'm going to credit you with this, again, you've done it each year, it's sort of either at the end or as we're doing some planning, you always have asked that question. Do we still, like, it came up with parks because of the limited number of parks. And I think that that's a good task as part of our process, is that every year we ask that question. Is this still a good subcommittee? Does it still do work? Does it produce outcome? So, yeah, I'm hoping that if ours don't do work, they go away because you ask that question every year, and I think that's a good question that you ask.
I like that.
I've always felt you've asked it for both, in a positive way.
Because then we'll have 25 subdivisions.
Well, we, you know, again, because of the way we've developed them, that would work great. I don't care if there were 100, because we don't move them forward
Right.
unless there's some work. You know, and Ben's work group's a good example. Ben's work group is still out there. We didn't disband the work group. It hasn't run its course. The plan is it will probably go away, but until the rest is set up, it has not run its course. But it's highly unlikely it will become a subcommittee. It may go away as a work group, but it's not done its work yet, and we shouldn't put a time frame on it, because we definitely have interest. It's a subject we all care about. It's a subject that overlaps in multiple places, and we don't want silos. So I see our committees being very limited because of what we make them go through beforehand. And it could be a year or two, you know, as long as the subcommittee doesn't have a reason to move forward. I mean, a work group, it'll stay a work group.
And the SAG zone seems like the perfect kind of thing for it because should pull people from lots of different areas, planning board, you know, conservation, economic development people, et cetera, along with, of course, specific stakeholders like farmers.
Right.
But with a shared objective from all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then
But I
similar
think
to
the
the LA trails.
shared objective is the key thing.
Right.
Right.
And then I like the work group idea too, because while LA Trails isn't a program or a group under us, we still have essentially like that work group chair
Right.
and liaison who's still connected.
And that to me, if I had to forecast the summary for the Trails Work Group, we will maintain a Trails Work Group, and its task will be to be a liaison with this other comprehensive
Right.
community-based organization. But that it doesn't dismantle and go away. And that may be a committee, a work group of one or two. But we keep that connection, because if it works the way it's looking so far, and I realize that, you know, it's under 60 days and doesn't really hasn't had its second meeting, it can be, again, the model for all these other places so we don't build silos. And other committees can organize, you know, groups and agencies and boards can look at this group and say, oh, this is how we structure. Because I believe conservation got off to its start the way it did, the organized start. It's because we had a committee that's been around for 10 years. They've got procedures, they do work plans, you know, so we had to look at least as good as our committee.
So to get back on track, are we discussing the definition of the work group? Are we there?
you know,
The definition.
to bring it to a head, I made that as a motion.
So I second
And I need clar, is that going to be our only definition? Because I don't think it meets what we do. And I can't tell the distinction, because I could use those same words for the subcommittee.
I still think that we can come up with more.
Not to sound like rude, I guess, but is it kind of a placeholder so that we can recommend that we have that
it. Yes.
work group and then we can flush this definition out later?
So that
What
we
if we
have
did-
the
Yes.
recommendations to the mayor's office for now, and then we can.
What if we
Yeah.
didn't call it anything to the mayor's office? Then we wouldn't put in the spot.
A group.
I'm
Just-
fine with calling it a work group and just saying.
A work group under our commission,
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the goal.
and not define it.
And not define it this month.
Sure,
Make them come back and
basically,
ask us.
what we normally would use the name of that work group as a way to define it.
You're right.
To define the purpose.
And then in a month, maybe we can help them out by taking your definitions of the egg and whatever is.
Yeah,
That
I
was
was
a great-
rounding that out.
So you still want to make a
That's all ready to go.
recommendation to the mayor that we establish, but a named work group. So we're going to name the work group that we're recommending. So would that be fish,
But
wildlife? and open space?
that would be,
No,
if you want to do it, that would be separate from the definition.
Right. She had,
I just
can
want to know
you
what
just
we're
repeat,
recommending.
Shelley,
today.
what you, how you would recommend
No.
doing it?
No, we are, actually, this isn't recommending anything to there was nothing as a part of my motion that was intended as a recommendation to the council. But, you know, some of these other topics we could consider for that. I think this is independent and basically a conservation commission definition of a work group.
Right.
Right.
Can somebody clarify for me what the name of the agricultural zone is? Is it the ag zone? Is that what it's called?
The zone
Ag
itself or
district?
the committee that just went away?
Agriculture and resource.
Natural
Agriculture
resources.
and natural resources zone, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if they use the word natural.
No,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because I think they didn't, and I always do, and I went
Okay.
back, because it upset me they
It's-
didn't.
it's
So
been-
my- so I guess
it's
my-
been- It's been changed multiple times, and so it's really been
Okay.
confusing.
So
So,
I guess my motion would
Because
be,
of the original ones, the original one was basically the time and forest.
okay,
yeah,
And that was the original zoning,
Definition,
and
okay.
that was very clear, you know.
that is clear what that
Well,
is, yeah.
but the, you know, some segments of the community wanted to be ethically correct and that sort
Sure.
of thing, and
Change
so,
that one line.
Change the lingo over time.
so that's when Norman Clayton
She's
came
got a
in.
bigger version
Yeah.
report of what.
I know, I have it.
So the motion, I guess, that I would recommend would be that we recommend to the mayor's office that work group to study the ag and resource zone further be established under our commission, which would continue the work of the recently completed committee and would be given a clear objective to make recommendations on changes to how that zone is developed and treated, and that the work group would have a group of stakeholders that not only is familiar with agricultural practices and has a stake in that land, but also has a diversity of residents from the city.
I would
That's
say,
okay.
I would say that.
I know, I'm like,
I definitely liked what we had up until like continue the work of the recently dissolved committee.
Yeah,
And I don't want to imply anything because I want to make sure that we're being clear.
yeah.
But I think we can pull some of the language of that final report to make sure
Sure.
that they have stakeholders and include
Yeah.
that in our recommendation. But yeah, I like I like stating the work that they would continue that of the recently dissolved ad hoc committee.
Yeah,
Okay.
with the goal of researching and making recommendations.
Making recommendations,
Yeah.
whatever they end up being,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
And the recommendations could be, we need the city to spend money to research
Right.
X, Y, and Z.
That's
Sounds
Right.
Like
that's
every
kind
other
of what the-
scientific paper out there, like needs more research.
You're right.
Okay. Okay, so Shelley motioned that. Tiz, I had you as a second.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that as the good job she did.
And
But if
Vera-
somebody else would like it.
I'll second it, I don't care.
Pick someone.
Everyone's-
Well, actually, I was thinking Mr. Keene should be.
I know, well, that's what I was
Because
thinking.
Mr. Keene would take it, but I know it's a lot of, the thing is, he would be our contact person. I know he doesn't like chair, and I know he doesn't want that.
Just
But
put him on.
quite honestly, our champion at this table for any of this work is Mr. Keene. So I'm hoping Mr. Keene would second that, so his name's.
You're being asked.
All you're doing right now, Mr. Keene,
Fine.
is seconding her motion.
I did, see,
All you're doing is seconding her motion.
I definitely will strongly support it, but it will be more politically acceptable if my name is not it.
Okay, and you tell us that, and I trust you.
I'm gonna go with the original TIS segment.
Okay.
There we go.
Are we all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. So,
Second, third, fourth.
I know, that I think covers all the subcommittee stuff, and it partially covers some of the ongoing work that we've been doing with the definitions, which is ongoing, and you'll present at the next.
But I would just make this a request and not as a motion, but that for the concept of an independent academic review be brought to the attention of the mayor and the council, you know, as something that they should give serious consideration to.
Independent and academic review of the zoning, or,
Yeah, you know, about basically a continuation of the same criteria that the UMS study, so that is an objective, it provides objective information down the road of exactly what occurred in that interim period, because that does not exist right now.
And he's named the thing, and I think I heard him say that we advise it, and we get to do that, so we make that motion. Because, yes, I think we should advise it, make sure it's clear, and provide what he's provided, which is the name, because you know that, and again, the next 10 people who are working on it probably don't even know that.
And basically, you know, with the, you know, some of John's hand twisting, like, I'm sure we could find some academic sponsors for that thing.
Good idea.
I don't know about that. I'll do my best if I know a couple of professors.
So are we
But-
making a?
No, that wasn't, that was just a suggestion,
Yeah.
but
To the-
not in the form of a motion.
Chair that she
Yeah.
would reach out
You
to.
know, that, you know, that we feel that it's or at least I feel anyway, and unless the rest of you feel differently, you know, that you really need that kind of factual information to make sound future decisions.
And this would be I would be advising city council,
And
mayor,
both,
the
because
city
Yeah,
manager.
yeah, but you know, it would be,
Not his-
if you present anything at the next council meeting, you present it at that meeting.
yeah, I definitely do the council and the mayor.
Yeah.
And you had a third piece that we put in as a recommendation, the segment where you were talking about the egg zone work and the pieces. Can you make that in the form of a suggestion that we follow up on?
On which now?
The piece in your 3 pieces that talked about looking at the egg zone as, I like your words better, but production, and then marketing.
Oh,
that-
you mean the 2 potential work groups for our commission?
Well, and I wouldn't use
Yes,
work groups as the
but
word,
in
but
in
2
the
areas
title,
that we know
that,
need
you know,
to be
that
followed
there-
up.
You know, there are two really subject matter areas that are extremely important, and basically would be the agricultural and marketing segment and the forest, wildlife, and open space.
That's the piece that we will.
Yep, I've got that written down, and I think this has been pretty well covered, so I want to make sure that we finish up here because it is quarter to 8, which is really late. And our work in progress, we already covered the street tree inventory, we covered some of the definitions of the subcommittees, work groups. You're going to provide an email to me with that, and I can include it in the agenda. And the last thing that we had for work in progress was the review of officer positions and associated tasks and duties, which was, can I borrow that?
Yep.
This little thing that we had last time.
That would
You
email that
gave-
to us, 'cause we didn't get that.
We didn't get that, and that's where.
She,
Well,
yeah,
'cause it
she
was-
printed it. and-
Yeah.
Yeah, I just,
Well, it's on the Google Drive, but I'll send it around, yeah, and it was included in the June one, so I just figured everyone had an electronic
I
copy
couldn't
already.
find it
But I didn't
online.
want it.
Oh,
No.
oh, I know why, because it wasn't updated, that was the, because I went to the website, again, I'm sorry, I don't understand the Google Drive stuff, had I known, because that's the only place I did look. But
I don't have the password for the Google Drive.
Okay, yeah, I sent it around, I'm not sure if Chuck was still on the committee, but I'll send it around, again, to everybody. And then I'll send this document around once more. But yeah, I'm not sure if you were including that original email in the council, so.
Maybe in the next minutes, we can do this part first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll take what I submitted and put it on that form, so you don't have to retype it.
Gotcha.
Because that's what I was looking for.
I think we've got a pretty full plate right now, because, but really we're pressured by the position that the council and mayor are at right now, that I think forcing a lot of issues right to the surface. I so move.
Yeah. I mean, this is good conversation, this is all up our alley,
Mhm.
so it's just,
Move to adjourn.
yes.
No, the last one, I assume somebody moved to adjourn, say, I'm second.
Do you want a copy of this? I'm not sure we'll look at it.
And I'm going to
Who's
send
got a
it,
copy that
I
doesn't
couldn't send
need
it
that?
electronically.
It's on the last week, I was so
So
frustrated last week.
if I, so how do I get to
Judge,
the
I-
But I have, he said more, I have some really good photos with